very large. She appeared to already be halfway through it. She also looked so tired. "Do you know," I started, breaking the silence. When she lifted her gaze to mine, I continued, "$20 says Newton is already passed out in a pile of his own vomit." I smirked.
"Oh,"
she said, looking distracted by something. Then,
oh.
She shut the book and stood up.
"I'm so sorry. I got so lost in the book, I didn't realize. I didn't mean to be so rude, honestly."
She made her way to the bookshelf. "No, I don't mind at all, it's just," I frowned then, not really knowing why I really didn't mind, but continued. "It's just, you look really tired. You should go home and get some sleep," I said sincerely. She turned then, after replacing the book to its spot on the shelf, and let out a humorless chuckle.
"Yeah, I should go home and get some sleep,"
she said in what sounded like a sarcastic voice. I furrowed my brows and looked at her quizzically. She grimaced and shook her head.
"I don't really sleep,"
she said, and then at the shocked look I'm sure was written all over my face, added
I mean, I try not to sleep. Bad dreams."
She finished lamely. But now it all made a kind of sense to me, the tired look on her face, the fact she sleeps at school, the nightmare she had in bio today. She didn't sleep either. Like me? You don't sleep either. You try to stay awake? I asked in an astonished voice. Her eyes got wide then, and her face got paler. Then suddenly she furrowed her brow in confusion.
"Either. You don't sleep?"
she asked quietly. I had never really spoken to anyone about my sleeping problems, but figured she was in the same situation. I shook my head slowly, holding her gaze.
"Nightmares,"
she whispered quietly. I paused for a second, not really liking the term. "You could call them that," I answered with tight eyes. She got a look of understanding on her face. So she knew what I meant. We stayed there for a few moments, staring at each other in silent mutual respect for all the bullshit the other had to go through, knowing what had to be accomplished in order to do something as difficult as staying awake. "Speaking of which, how do you do it? Stay awake?" I asked curiously.
"Coffee, cooking, homework,"
she trailed off, shrugging.
"I try to catch a little here and there at school, when I can, because it's so hard to sleep there."
She paused, and then shook her head.
"At least, until today. I'll probably never be doing that again,"
she finished, averting her gaze to my gold carpet. I felt guilty then, figuring she was referring to her nap in bio today, in which I just let her sleep through. If her nightmares were anything like mine, and I had no way of knowing, she probably woke up in a complete panic. I frowned to myself.
"How do you do it?"
she asked, tilting her head slightly. I leaned back against my headboard. "Carlisle's a doctor. I can score some shit from him sometimes. Uppers, do you know?" She looked slightly taken aback by my casual talk of drug use. I shrugged. "Or, I can just sketch, and it will keep me awake, concentration, and all," I added, not wanting her to think I was some kind of drug addict. "I mean, coffee," I scoffed. "Seriously? All she had was coffee? How the fuck does she do it? And sleeping at school? I'd never make a mistake like that." She just shrugged, and then looked towards the door, and back to me, seeming hesitant.
I should probably go. I don't want Alice to worry about me, but thanks for letting me hide from Mike."
Then one side of her mouth quirked up into a grin. I nodded and matched her grin with my own. This Alice one wasn't so bad after all. When she made her way to the door, I thought for a moment before making my next remark. "Hey," I called. She turned around and gave me a questioning glance. "You know the gazebo out back?" I asked, referring to the covered gazebo Carlisle and me, Eliza's mom, had built straddling the property lines of the two backyards. Bella nodded at me, so I continued. "Sometimes at night I like to go out there. The cold helps me stay awake." I paused then, considering how to phrase what I wanted to ask. "Maybe I'll see you there some night," I finished in a casual tone. Bella's eyes lit up a little at the mention of seeing me again, and she nodded, smiling, before opening the door and walking out of my room. I'd be going to the gazebo tomorrow night. The idea of having someone to at least talk to at night was enough to make me go. But I was also very interested in getting to know Bella. It was nice, for once, not to feel alone.
Bella's point of view. Edward was right. Mike was, in fact, passed out in a pile of his own vomit lying in the second-story bathroom with the door wide opened. There goes $20, I thought. I looked closer and noticed he had a bloody nose. It looked like he hit it on the sink, or something, when he passed out. I let a dark chuckle slip through my lips. Quietly, I made my way down the stairs, avoiding the remaining conscious people, and slipped into the foyer. I walked out of the Cullen house in lifted spirits, and strolled back home breathing the misty air in deeply. The night had ended on a surprisingly good note. Edward was harsh at times, and irritable, but I was interested in knowing more about him. I didn't necessarily agree with his drug use, but who was I to say anything? I know how hard it is to stay awake. When I got home I noticed Alice was already asleep in her bed, still wearing the green dress. I smiled to myself, hoping she found Jasper tonight, and made my way to my room to change my clothes. I hesitated at the door with my hand hovering over the knob. Deciding to be brave, and mentally cursing myself for not setting out my night clothes earlier in the day, I opened the door, and raced to my dresser as fast as possible. I plucked out the first thing I felt, and bolted out of the room towards the kitchen without looking back. Panting with anxiety, I got sudden inspiration for a cookie recipe, so I abandoned my clothes on the kitchen table, and began whipping up a batch of bloody noodles. While I whipped the raspberries and dough, I thought back to Edward Cullen. I'd be going to the gazebo tomorrow night, and I hoped with everything in me, he'd be there.